Good morning. Welcome to Mullin It Over. This is now episode 44 on Wednesday, May 25th, 2022. Nate Mullins joining you live in the studio. That's right. We figured out a way to get our hotspot a little bit better reception so we can go live this morning. So if there is any quality issues, we apologize, but we're trying our best here at Studio Squared. We are live in the studio for the first time on the air. And joining me this morning, Zack Baker.
Hey.
Thanks for coming on with me, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. This
Always
is great.
I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah.
So I know you're not much of a morning person, but I really appreciate you carving me out a chunk of your time here in the early morning hours.
Well, you know, it's good. I feel good to be out here this morning, and it was good to get up. It was good to see what it's like at this time of the morning.
I've never experienced this time much.
It's been years.
So Zack Baker is the sports editor at the Findlay Courier and also the Review Times as well. He worked with the Advertiser for a long time. Him and I have had some, I'd say, experience together over the years. Done a few shows together. Spent quite a few games together on the sidelines and the press box.
I was gonna say I've had some experience with Zach too, but I don't want to talk about that.
That's another story for a podcast, possibly.
Right.
Is this going to be Greg airing his grievances from 11 years ago?
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be the whole...
It's finally time now.
Yeah.
We'll wait for Festivus for that.
Yeah.
So once again, it is Wednesday, May 25th, and let's take a look at the weather before we really get into this interview, because right now it's 64 degrees. It's going to be mostly cloudy today. You're going to see a little bit of rain in the forecast, but for the most part, it's not going to be too bad. Maybe around 1, 2 o'clock, we might get a little bit of downpour, but after that, we should be pretty much in the clear for the rest of the day. It's going to get up near 77 today, so I mean, all things considered, it's not a bad day.
It's a Northwest Ohio spring.
That's right.
You just never know. You roll the dice every day.
We've been spoiled lately, so...
Oh, it was wonderful. Wonderful yesterday. Terrific.
You got to pay for it every once in a while, and this is one of those days, I guess. So, Zach, let's talk. We're deep into baseball playoffs now. Softball playoffs are even deeper.
Yeah.
I wanted to give you a little bit of chance to I wanted to talk to you first about baseball, but I really want to dig into softball because I haven't really got a chance to cover any softball games in this area. Mm-hmm. And I know that you've covered a few. But first, let's talk about baseball. You and I were at the same location yesterday for both games. You were there for the Advertiser Tribune.
I was doing a little bit for all three papers, actually, the AT, and of course Old Fort playing in that second game, so they're part of the RT as well. So yes. I was there for that, and of course Hopewell is covered by all three papers. So I was there for those games with you. So
Hopewell, one of the top teams in this area, disappointing loss yesterday.
Yeah, I think so. I think that one of the things that Coach Tony Swanigan said yesterday was that he had never had a season quite like this, in where the offense was so good. They were really rolling for the first really the better part of this season. They started with a large undefeated streak. I think they got as high as number 2 in the Division IV poll, and then the last couple weeks the offense just started to decline a little bit, and we saw a little bit of that yesterday. And so, they ended up, getting to the district semis, becoming basically not winning the Sandusky Bay Conference River Division. Lakota won that. And then, kind of culminated yesterday with the loss to Calvert, which was, a very, very, very intense game. I mean, it took 10 innings, and just a very, I would say, I'm sure they were happy about the season. 20-5 is a great record. But given where they started and how it ended, I'm sure there's a little bit of disappointment.
Going into the season, I'm sure they all had expectations. Every team in the area does. But I don't think they quite expected the start that they got. So maybe, going into the season, they didn't have quite as high expectations. But once you get to that point, when you're 14-0, you're rolling, you got everything working for you, you start to raise those expectations. And so you're right, 20-5 is a great season, but once you raise those expectations and you fail to meet them, it's got to be disappointing. As a player and as a coach, it's something that it's going to sting for a while. Oh, that's not going to go away.
And this is a program that has had some really good years over time. I mean, of course, you can go all the way back. I mean, I'm sure you can. Some people in this area can go back even further, but I go back to Logan Sendelbaugh and those teams in the beginning of this decade when Brian Rohrbach was the coach.
Yeah.
And the success that they had. And of course, Tony Swanigan before that was a really good coach with them, and they had some really good seasons. But I think that, the thing this year that is something is like you saw the pitching that they had.
Yeah.
Kane McDonald had a wonderful season for them. And, so you get into these situations, you get deeper into the situations, and they had good pitching yesterday, but defensive miscues, really, there were a lot of them throughout the game. And I think that the ones, especially late, whether they were errors or not, just some miscues that and Calvert is a scrappy team, and you open the door a little bit for them, and they come through, and now Calvert's in a position where it can win its second district title in as many years.
And that's something that I wanted to talk about next was this Calvert Seneca's team. I mean, this team, after last year's deep run into the playoffs, they had expectations, but I think a lot of people wanted to temper those expectations because, they didn't quite have the same group coming back. They had lost a lot, and Nick Seifert was a big part of that group last year. He's not coming back this year, so they didn't know what to expect, but I'm sure in that program, as always, with Matt Coleman, expectations are high as well. But, this team they had a rough start, and they had a rough season for the most part, but towards the end, you started to see them start to figure things out. The bats started to come around. The pitching really was there for him. Mason Johnson started to put together some great performances. Max Paul as well. And then you got a young guy like Blake Coleman, the freshman phenom, coming in. And, I mean, you've got some talent there, and now they're starting to gain that confidence. And I think this time of year, that's so important.
And I think the other part of it is that they're disciplined enough hitters that they can put the ball in play against solid pitching.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to this part of the season, you want to force the action a little bit, and I think they've done that just by putting the ball in play. And Matt said after the game that that was something that they hadn't done all year, and now it's starting to come around, and they're able to force some action. I talked to Mason Johnson after the game, and he sort of said the same thing. You've got to put the ball in play. There's a lot of confidence, and that's the other thing. Whenever you go on a postseason run, that confidence starts to get there. And maybe that experience they had a year ago in the regional tournament, that paid some dividends this year, even with some of the losses that they had from the roster. But Mason Johnson did a terrific job, on the mound also. Yeah, just tremendous. He was great yesterday in relief.
Yeah.
And they were in a position where, Matt said, you look at this group and he's like, I'm sure my starter, not thrilled about being pulled, but you had to do certain things to keep things rolling. And I think the biggest test yesterday for Calvert was when it had a little bit of a breakdown there in the sixth inning. Hopewell out and ties the game. One more hit, and they're going to be on their heels in the last inning. Ashton Bohr came in and pitched very, very well in relief for Hopewell Loudon.
Yeah.
And so if they gave up one more hit or one more defense, if there's one defensive miscue, their season could have been over. And they had to go through several innings where Hopewell had the potential for a walk-off.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen because they executed. And that's what veteran teams who are well coached with kids who buy in, that's the sort of thing that they're able to do at the end of a season.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the well-coached part, I think, is something that kind of gets overlooked. But, I mean, Matt Coleman has done a phenomenal job with this team in the short time that he's taken over. And like I mentioned, expectations are huge right now, but he does a good job of managing those expectations within the team, but also keeping them focused on their goals and making sure that they understand the potential that they have as a team. So I think this is a Seneca's team that they're playing with house money right now. So anything can happen.
Well, and he's been a guy who's been successful. He and Swanigan actually are very similar.
Yes.
In how they've mirrored each other with the success. Tony's a baseball guy as well, and so is Matt. I mean, I've talked to both of them about, it's very easy for us to go off with Matt. It's the Guardians. With Tony, it's the Reds. Yep. And so you can go off on, and they're just baseball guys.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of old school when those two get together. You feel like you're watching an old time baseball game a little bit. It was a lot of fun yesterday, and both of them are really interesting. And so every time that they match up, it's a step. It goes a step further than a lot of baseball games that
Yes.
you see in the area. And it's hard not to get excited about that, especially when you love baseball as much as we do.
Absolutely.
So,
well, and you mentioned both of them being baseball players. They're baseball guys. The coolest thing is watching them play down at third base and watching them coach the players. But then they get a foul ball over their area, and the natural instinct for them takes over, and then you'll see a bare hand snag by Coleman down the third baseline, and oh wait, never mind, I'm coach. I'm just going to lob that back to you.
I'll tell you one thing. Yesterday, it's so interesting that there was a moment. I think it was, I can't remember if it was McDonald who was up or if it was Cohen Sandoval or one of them, but there's nobody on the third base side. It's just me. Standing right behind and the fans behind, but they're not going to be able to hear. And Tony is talking to him. He goes like this. He covers his whispers, covers, make sure no lip readers in the Calvert. That is old school. And then when he did the first, I just happened to be over by him. I was over by Matt for part of the game, but when they walked one of the hitters, he just goes, "Sir." And that was it. It's brilliant to watch. It's like watching I don't know, but it's fun to watch, and they're two technicians really,
yeah,
and it's fun to watch, and they're local guys who've really run two excellent programs, and it's a lot of fun to watch them go up against each other. And for me, who's had a chance to talk to both of those guys and knows how into it they are, you always feel bad because whoever goes on is going to be a tough out.
Yeah, absolutely. The other game we covered there, Old Fort and Norwalk St. Paul. Stockaders with their first sectional championship in over 20 years, so they also kind of felt like they were playing with house money, feeling good, rolling with that confidence. And at one point in that game, you might have thought, hey, they got this thing locked up. They got their one of their aces on the mound. They've got the lead going into the sixth inning. And they had all the momentum at that point. But then things just started to kind of unravel for them. And I think a lot of that was, Isaac Snyder got into a little bit of trouble early in the game. In the first inning, he gave up a couple of hits, couple of runs, and he did get touched up in the first. And then through the second inning, I heard the announcer say that his pitch count was up in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And this is in the second inning.
Right.
So he did get into a groove, and he got comfortable. And then the third, fourth, and fifth inning, he just cruised. But once he got to that sixth inning, I looked down at that pitch count, and it's up in the 90s. And then I'm thinking to myself, this might be a good opportunity where the manager looks and says, all right, if he gets into any kind of trouble, quick hook. Let me get my guy in here. We want to keep this lead. We want to preserve this. Things just kind of started to unravel for Snyder, and he got up into the hundreds in that pitch count. And then you start to see batters working the count, fouling pitches off, and extending these at-bats to 7, 8, 9 pitch at-bats. Then you start to see that pitch count really rise, and the fatigue became a factor for him. So that was it was frustrating to watch because as a fan, as a fan of baseball, you see what's happening and you feel for the kid,
I think that what happened, and we saw this a little bit in the first game too, is that it's like a snowball when things start going. And that was the thing. I mean, I don't think that there were too many. The first hit of that inning was I believe it was a line drive to center. He gave up some hard contact, but I think a lot of it was just, again, putting the ball in play and making and again, sometimes it was Isaac himself who had to make the play, but they had a lot of errors.
There were 6 errors in that sixth inning.
And some of that was just placement. There was a bunt that I can't remember which player it was for Norwalk St. Paul, but he laid in a perfect bunt to score the tying run.
There was at least 4 perfect bunts by the Flyers in that game.
And that's just execution. I mean, you can't, but it was small ball, and I think also that, this is a situation, we talked about the experience that Calvert has. Well, that's something that Old Fort, in these games, it doesn't really have. Yeah. I mean, this is a program that is made, and I told Matt and I, the writer for the AT and the sports editor for the AT, I told him yesterday, they've come so far. It's amazing to watch Old Fort execute as well as they did. And they played from a pitching standpoint, and I'll tell you who Isaac reminds me of, and I don't know, you're a little younger than me, but do you remember Steve Olin for the Indians?
Yeah.
The side armor.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, died very young, but that's who he reminds me of with that kind of, he's almost hitting the ground when he goes with his sidearm delivery. The former Guardians pitcher Dan Quisenberry is another one, a little bit further back, but he was a little more prominent.
One thing I noticed about that, though, his motion, as he's coming through with that motion, he's not in defensive position to field. And I think that's one thing that Norwalk saw, and they took advantage of with those bunts towards the end of that game. They put him in the position where he had to make a play.
Right.
And with him in that, awkward position coming out of his throwing motion, he has to come back and settle before he can go after that ball. It gave them an extra step, I feel like.
Well, it gave them an extra step, and then also just a lot of things went wrong.
Yeah, mental.
And I think it was
mental errors.
It was a snowball thing, and I think too that you could feel it because I was on the Old Fort side taking pictures. You could sort of feel, and they're having fun, but the intensity is ratcheted up just a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And they get to the bottom of the sixth inning. The bottom of the sixth inning, you're 6 outs away from getting to the district final to play a team that you've beaten twice. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they beat Calvert twice during the regular season.
Yeah.
So it's kind of there for them, but it is hard. Those as you get closer, that everything gets a little tighter. And again, this is a young team, and I think that you saw that a little bit. You saw a little bit too with Norwalk St. Paul, and again, their ability to lay down the perfect bunt, their ability to put the ball in play. And once it started going, just sort of got away from Old Fort. But that happens to young teams
for sure.
And they only have 2 seniors now. They're both very good seniors, but they're gonna. I heard you say this because I actually had to. My cell phone was about to die, so I actually watched a little bit of. I was right outside the stadium watching the first couple innings on your broadcast, and you said it's important that he struggles a little bit in the beginning and then he gets rolling. Well, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And he was terrific. Isaac was terrific. Isaac Snyder was terrific for from the second inning through the fifth inning. That's 4 terrific frames that he put up. And even in the first inning, I think the biggest problems was just control.
Yeah.
And
he did have a little bit of a command issue coming out the gate. He walked a couple batters, and he just with that motion. It takes him a little bit to settle in. And I feel like once he settles in, good luck. You're not going to touch him. Yeah. And St. Paul, I feel like, just took advantage of, some opportunities there at the end of the game to rough him up. But at the beginning of that game, I said that. I said, you've got to make sure that if you're going to get to him, you got to get to him now. Do your damage now, because once he settles in, he's tough.
Well, and I think also that, again, the Flyers, the Norwalk St. Paul, there's a lot of kids who played in a lot of big games, and baseball and otherwise. And, we might have seen that a little bit at the end there, that just that experience versus a team that's just sort of getting there. But I think the future is very bright for the Stockaders.
Absolutely. So let's talk about softball a little bit. I have not got a chance to cover any softball games this year. And I want to touch on these 2 local teams that are deep in the playoffs now. We're in the regionals, and we've got a couple of local teams playing today, one in Strongsville, one over in Clyde. Talk about these 2 teams. Do you know anything about these teams? Have you had a chance to cover either one of them?
Well, Hopewell I know a lot more about.
Okay.
Well, I shouldn't say. I haven't had a chance to cover them. I know, some of their players. I know Isabel Beidel Cheese for Hopewell out in the circle has done a really, really good job. And, of course, Shay Harper is she's the Barry, and I say Barry Bonds, and that sounds like a dated reference, but the reason I say that is when you have a hitter who is so scary that you may have to walk her rather than pitch to her at any time because she's that dangerous. And I think that Shay Harper is that dangerous.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, Coach Milligan and just again, this has been a program. It was actually kind of surprising to me, when I read Matt's story. The first district championship for them. You think about that. Hopewell's had some really good players and some decent teams, but it's amazing to me, their first district title. And
that's crazy.
But I think that again, they are a team that Beidel Cheese is a really good pitcher, but that offense is so important. And once that offense gets going, they have so many hitters. Milligan and other people who can just bash the ball, and it's. I think that's an exhausting thing for a pitcher when you keep looking about her again, And I think that's the success of them. But Shea Harper was someone that you would see, and because we still covered Hopewell Loudon for the Courier.
Yes.
And we'd get the results, and it'd be like, oh, another home run and 2 doubles for Shea Harper. Oh, 3 doubles. Oh, there's another home run, 2 home runs for Shea Harper. She is just an incredible hitter. She reminds me a little bit of Madison Martin over in Van Buren. Madison Martin had 6 RBIs in the district final for Van Buren against Liberty Benton.
Wow.
And yesterday she hit a grand, and she had 2 home runs in the first 3 innings. Yesterday in the district final in Elida, she hit a grand slam, and that's how Van Buren got to the regional final tomorrow. So those 2 pitchers, and I bring up Van Buren not just to shout out Matt Nye's alma mater, but the hitters. The hitters are really, really important for these programs, and I worry about any time that you get deeper into these situations. I worry about you're going to run into that one really, really special pitcher, the one that doesn't give up a lot of runs and doesn't give up a lot of contact. And certainly, Calvert was able to score off Hopewell Loudon last week. So we'll see what happens today. They're playing today, I think, in Strongsville.
Yes.
And so we'll see what happens today. But I think that, again, they're going to need good pitching from Isabel Beidelcheese, and then, can you get the hitting that you've gotten from Harper and the rest of the Chieftains?
Once again, that's Hopewell Loudon softball versus Vienna Matthews, Strongsville High School. That's today at 5 o'clock. And then Sycamore Mohawk. The Warriors still in it, Lady Warriors. They'll play at Clyde High School today, playing Van Wert. Do you know anything about this Mohawk team? Because I feel like they've kind of surprised some people.
Well, I don't know as much about them individually. I know that from talking to Matt, they have sort of surprised people. But then again, maybe we shouldn't be surprised, because unlike Hopewell Loudon, Mohawk has this ridiculous tradition.
Yeah.
When I got here back in 2005, they won the state title, and they'd won several state titles with Jenny Wynandy. And that tradition is still alive. Now, I think it's a surprise that they've gotten as far as they've gotten to a degree, because they didn't have maybe the season that Hopewell had.
Right.
But, I can't. It's harder to talk about them because I haven't seen them. But I would say that, again, it's girls who are coached a certain way and have been coached a certain way, even though they've gone through coaching changes.
Right.
That tradition has remained, and they continue to execute at a high level. And that's where that experience really does factor in games like this, games today. And of course, Mohawk, dating back to, when you and I both started in the Midland Athletic League, was still a thing. And you would see teams like
the ashes of the MAL.
Oh my gosh. But you thought about it back then. Carey with Eric Mulholland as the coach, and Jenny Wynandy, of course, Jamie Leininger, New Regal. We saw what they did last year and what they'd done with Jamie Leininger's daughter. I think it was Jacqueline Leininger. I can't quite remember which one it was.
I know who you're talking about, though.
But yeah, they were a force to be reckoned with for years and years.
Yeah.
And this area is so strong in softball, and now we're seeing teams that maybe weren't as strong in this area, and they're stepping in. Teams like, I know Calvert had a great year. Salem Moyer, I think. I was at a game where she had, I think 3 home runs and 9 RBIs against Arcadia. And wow. I had never seen in my entire career, which is unfortunately, it makes me sound like I'm in my 40s, which, I am. But, it's
many moons.
Yeah, it's still unfortunate. But I would say that, that she had a day where she drove in 9 runs. I had never in my career seen an individual day like that in baseball or softball.
It
was
unreal.
Her game against Arcadia, I think they scored 19 runs in the first inning. It was an incredible game, and Arcadia went up and they scored, a bunch of runs in the bottom. So it was kind of a back and forth thing. I mean, it ended up being a complete rout, but Calvert was that good. But now Calvert's good, Hopewell Loudon's good, and of course Seneca East, has had success over the years. And it's just, this area is just so fertile for softball.
It's a hotbed for softball.
Volleyball,
for sure.
Volleyball and softball are really the sports, I think. Of course, we've got some good track athletes as well. But for me, when it comes to team sports in Seneca County and in Black Swamp, that whole area,
I was just about to say, yeah,
volleyball and softball, it's like you just know you're going to see some really quality coaching, some really quality athletes.
Absolutely. All right, so Zach, we talked about local sports enough. Let's dig into some Guardian stuff, because we both are sporting our Guardians hats.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about
Tommy said that's cute that you guys are wearing matching hats today.
Almost matching.
Well, we didn't.
He's got the red bill. I got the blue.
We didn't coordinate. This is just. It was either this or the BG hat, Greg. Tommy.
So
Tommy's like Mystery Science Theatering this from home. I just know.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I think he's at work this morning actually watching. So
Yeah. Hey,
So-
I can't judge. I do that all the time. So.
Tommy's just one of those guys that loves to push buttons. I feel like that's his
Well,
favorite thing.
I wanted to say too. I had a chance to watch. You and Ben Gillig did an excellent interview. I got a chance to watch that, and that was a lot of fun. And Ben's a friend of mine as well. He's a great guy.
We'll be doing that again on Friday.
But I do have to challenge one thing he said, since we're talking about the Guardians.
Challenge.
I told you what this was going to be.
Yep.
He said that they traded for the corpse of Chris James. Oof. Okay, now I thought I feel like I have to defend Chris James' honor here. Okay,
Zach told me the batting average yesterday of Chris James.
299, Ben. Chris James hit 299 that year, and he started with the number 18, and then he had to change his number in the middle of the year because they retired Mel Harder's number. So he went from 18 to 7. Think about how hard that is for somebody's confidence to get hot with a number and then get it changed. Because have you ever met a non-superstitious baseball player?
No, they don't exist.
Oh, or coach. And, Craig, of course, and Chris James, of course, we all know, he's the other James in that family. His brother was Craig James, who was the part of the Pony Express with Eric Dickerson at Southern Methodist University.
Yep.
Went through the death penalty. His school went through the death penalty. And you're going to say that it's the court. Oh, my gosh. I was just like, Chris James needs to be given some respect.
Zach
Also,
has thrown down the challenge.
yeah,
man.
I'm just saying.
What other thing? You got another thing you want to challenge that he said?
No. I thought the interview was great. And I thought Ben did a great job, and it was great to see him. I hadn't seen him for a while, and it was great to see him and great to hear him, because I think he and I are kind of similar. We both are really intense Cleveland sports fans, and then also just the interest in history and sports history, which is a big deal.
You're both Rolodexes of history facts.
Well, you asked me, and yeah, and when we're done with the Guardians, I do want to bring up one story that I'm going to be working on that I think people will really be interested in. So,
Okay.
But the Guardians, go ahead.
So let's talk about this Guardians team a little bit, because there's not really a whole lot to unpack here. But they come into this season, before the season starts, they have little to no expectations. They have a payroll. Before they signed Jose to an extension, they have a payroll that is less than the Browns starting quarterback's salary for the year. And this is a team that, although they do have some young talent, they've underachieved over the last couple of years. And management didn't exactly inspire any confidence in the fan base over the summer by, they changed the name, they changed the identity of the team, but then they do nothing to reinvigorate the fan base and want to get the fans behind that team. So to me, it's just frustrating as a fan, but I'd like to know how you feel about it.
Well, I actually think that given given their parameters, I think they've actually overachieved. Because
for sure.
I had really low expectations, last season, because again, this really started, Nate, after the 2017 season.
It did.
And they started stripping, 2017 was the year that I really thought they were going to win the whole thing. And when they didn't, it seems like since then they've kind of slowly but surely, and whether it was trading Edwin Encarnacion to Seattle, or just letting Brad Hand go at one point, just like letting him go and whatever. I felt like they really, I wasn't sure what they're doing. Now they have been so good at making trades. I do think
that Mike Clevenger's trade might have saved this franchise, to be honest.
Well, I think this is the thing. I'm not positive or overly optimistic about the Guardians this season. I am very optimistic about the Guardians in the next few years.
Oh, they have a lot of talent coming up that you still haven't seen yet.
Well, and not only that, but they are loaded with middle infielders.
Yeah.
And so that not all those guys are going to play. These are talented guys. Gabriel Arias, I hope I say that right, is one of those guys. Tyler Freeman, And we've seen some of them. I mean, some of these guys aren't quite as high level, but look at Andreas Jimenez.
Yep.
And the steps that he's taken this year. He's probably going to be a cornerstone for a while.
And we still haven't seen guys like Nolan Jones.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's seen Nolan Jones. I've been hearing. I'm not sure that Nolan Jones exists.
Is he still a thing?
I've heard. It's like he and you look back at it and you hear about guys who are there, but you only hear about them.
You don't really see.
They never actually. So I don't know. I think he's a thing, but he's been hurt a lot, and and I don't know, and I don't know if he's going to hit big league pitching when he gets here. There were guys that I heard about for years, Bobby Bradley, and they're just things that happen to guys, that they're not quite. It's a lot different to be mashing in the international league and then come up to the big leagues. It's just a lot different.
Yeah.
So it's going to be tough, but I just think that they're loaded with middle infielders. Of course, Owen Miller was off to a really good start as well.
For sure.
I think that what's going to happen is you're going to have an overload of guys, and so you're probably going to have to use some of these guys to create trades to fill other needs.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to.
There's a lot of teams in major leagues that are looking for middle infield.
Yeah, and the other thing is, but we're starting to see when you have an overload of middle infielders, instead of trading them right now, they're trying to we've seen that. We've seen Ahmed Rosario in left field. We've seen Owen Miller at first base.
The experiments.
Richie Palacios has been out in left field. We haven't even seen him in the infield, and he's a second baseman, shortstop by trade. So, but I think that there's a lot of talent, and a lot of reasons to be excited, especially with guys who haven't gotten here. And that's not even talking about their ability to create pitching. It's almost like you take a pitcher, you put him into the Carl Willis pitching machine, and he comes out this. You end up with a guy Shane Bieber being a top flight starting pitcher. Now it looks like Tristan McKenzie has done that as well. One of the things that kind of did bother me about the Guardians over the years is people would always talk about the hitting coach, and they would always criticize the hitting coach. And my thought was, it's okay to criticize the hitting coach, but are we ever going to give the pitching coach some love for what they've done?
Right.
Carl Willis is. I know Carl Willis wasn't here when Corey Kluber won his first Cy Young, but this guy has been around. When Mickey Callaway went to manage the Mets, Willis came back. He'd been with Eric Wedge. He was the pitching coach when the Indians had CC Sabathia and Jake Westbrook and Cliff Lee. He comes back, and now we're seeing, Corey Kluber was there for a little bit when he was there, and then he moved on, and now you've got guys like, Clevenger as well. Clevenger became a heck of a starter and was able to fetch some really good prospects, and then you move on to other pitchers that they have. McKenzie's just fun to watch right now. I feel like he's coming into his own. And
you saw guys last year kind of take that next step. Savali comes to mind. Plesac was another one that kind of took that next step, but they also, sometimes they do regress a little bit, and it's nice to have a guy like Tristan McKenzie to step up when some of these guys, might not meet the expectations they had for themselves.
And we saw that last night. Zach Plesac is struggling a little bit, but you just get a sense that the pitching it's kind of funny because the pitching has been inconsistent, I would say, this season. But again, I'm not sure, and I don't want to rain on the parade of the Guardians this year. I just don't feel like this is a year where I really think they're going to contend. But I think they're putting themselves in position to contend in future years.
For sure. So I think that's pretty much all we can cover when it comes to the Guardians. There's a lot. We could sit here and talk for hours about the Guardians, but
I can talk for hours about anything.
I know. Trust me, I know. That's why I love having you on, Zach. It helps me because I can just ask you a question and sit back and
7 or 8 hours later
for about 10 minutes, and then all right, now just honestly, you're one of my favorite guests because it makes my job easier when someone elaborates on an answer instead of just gives you the short answer, because this is media. We want color, we want the depth, and that's why I love having you on. So we talked about the Guardians or anything else. You said you wanted to talk about something else. You had another project.
Yeah. Well, this is just one of the things I think is really interesting, and I'm kind of working on it now. One of the guys that's going into the Hall of Fame this year is Bud Fowler, and Bud Fowler was one of the first African American players in professional baseball at the end of the 19th century, and maybe the first. Historically, there but he played a lot of different places, but he also spent a year with a Findlay baseball team, and he's going into the Hall of Fame this year. Now obviously he's been gone for a while.
Yeah.
It is going to be, but this is the first story that I've really done that like that, where not only is he gone, but so is just about everybody who knew him is gone. So,
right.
But it's interesting to see a guy with Ohio roots, Northwest Ohio roots, and I'm working on a story, hopefully for this summer, about Bud Fowler and his connection to Northwest Ohio. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm looking forward to putting that to paper.
That's really cool. Honestly, I'm looking forward to it now because I love those little history tidbits, those little snippets of history in this area. That's what I talked about with Ben Gillig. I'd like to have him kind of spearhead maybe a sports history segment. Every week we talk about something sports history that's related to this area. And that's why, writers like yourself, writers like, Josh Morgret, Matt, and I, you guys do a great job of digging deep and finding those little snippets of information that I just don't know and most people don't know. So Great job, Zach. Appreciate your time this morning. Anything else you want to talk about?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens later today with Hopewell out in softball. And then, of course, on Friday with Calvert and Norwalk St. Paul, see if Calvert can get back. And it's been an interesting spring season, and I think also – obviously, we've got state track coming up, so there's just a lot of stuff going on. This is really an exciting and busy time for us, but those are the best times.
Well, you also have the Tornadoes on Thursday as well.
That's
right. Carson Malott, the Division 9 or Region, was it Division 9? District 9. District 9 Player of the Year. Put together a solid senior campaign. Looks to be that's going to be a tough matchup for them in Ontario. So
yeah, and I think, but it is nice to see Columbian's baseball team do as well as it has, and see Carson kind of come up and be. I mean, I you go back so many years, and I remember him playing catch with his dad.
Yeah,
it's amazing how time goes. But it's kind of cool to watch. I've had a chance. Billy Hand from the Sandusky Register. He's done a few of his games. He's been able to show some of his pitching.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it's very exciting to watch.
He's got some nasty stuff.
He's a talent.
Yeah, he really is, and he's going to make Matt Palm's job a little easier over there in Findlay for sure.
Yeah.
So, Zach, once again, appreciate your time.
Hey,
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Zack Baker, our guest this morning on Mullin It Over. That's pretty much going to do it for today. I would get into the events in Tiffin and all that kind of stuff, headlines, but you know what, folks? Why don't you find out for yourself today? Because we had a great conversation with Zack Baker. Head over to the Advertiser Tribune, find your headlines for today, and then check out the community calendar on Seneca Regional Chamber's website and figure out what's going on for today. Also, don't be afraid to check out the weird news that's going on in the area and just all around the world, because that's kind of that's my favorite part of the Mullin Over episode every morning. But we didn't get a chance to get to it today. We'll get to it tomorrow, hopefully. We do have a interview that I'm recording later tonight that'll be on the morning show tomorrow. Interview with Travis Kinn, Columbian basketball coach. So that'll be recorded tonight. It'll be on tomorrow's show. But until tomorrow, thanks for tuning in here on Mullin It Over, episode 44. Thanks to Zack Baker for coming on with me. And thanks to Greg Kinn for pushing the buttons and turning the dials and keeping us live here in Studio Squared. Once again, this is our first live broadcast from the studio. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great day, everybody.